Moving on to topic 2.6, consumer and producer surplus concept. The first question wanted me to explain the concept of surplus using a real-life market. So, for surplus, a surplus happens basically when the quantity of a supplied product is more than the quantity demanded. So QS is greater than QD at a specific price, and this happens typically when prices are set too high, and this can lead to like excess inventory that like buyers don't want to buy basically. So for my market, I just came up with avocados, and I said like the store expects to sell 200 that week, but since they're out of season, only 150 are sold. So the 200 avocado supply exceeded the 150 avocado demand, meaning there's a 50 unit avocado surplus. Looking at the graph, at $2 there's a surplus, which means that the quantity demanded is less than the quantity supplied, because at $2 the quantity demand was 150 avocados, and at $2 the quantity supplied was 200. So that creates a surplus up here. Switching it up a little bit with a new example for the market graph is the price per textbook and the number of textbooks. So for question 2, where does consumer surplus exist on a market graph? This upper triangle from where the equilibrium of the supply and demand, where they intersect, this upper triangle is where consumer surplus is. And basically it's the difference between the maximum price consumers are willing to pay for a textbook and the price that they actually pay. And so it kind of just shows the benefit to consumers from buying a textbook for less than what they were prepared to pay. And then producer surplus is this lower triangle below the equilibrium. And producer surplus is the difference between the price where the price at which the bookstore would be willing to sell the textbook and the price that they actually received it. So it shows the benefit to producers from selling at a higher price than they would really be willing to accept. Question 3 says, how do you calculate the area of consumer surplus using a graph example with numbers? So consumer surplus, as I said before, is this triangle, and to calculate that, you would just do 1/2 base times height to get the triangle. And so the base of the triangle would be all of this, which is 5. So you would do 1/2 times 5. And then the height is going to be this distance. So you would have to do 100 minus 50, which is 50. So that's going to be your height. And then 1/2 times 5 times 50 is $125. And that is how you would calculate the area of consumer surplus. The final question of this section wanted, using a real-life market, explain what happens to consumer surplus when there's an increase in demand for a product. So in this example, let's just say coffee, an increase in demand. So this is the demand originally at equilibrium, and this is it after it's shifted, because an increase in demand is a shift to the right. And so the increase in demand for coffee would lead to a higher equilibrium price and a higher equilibrium quantity, because as you can see, the lines for where your equilibrium are, you can visibly see that it's going up on both the price axis and the quantity axis. And so while more coffee is sold, the consumer surplus actually decreases because of the higher price. So like the increased price will reduce the benefit that consumers get. And you can see that the initial consumer surplus would be 1/2 times 100 times 2, which would be 100. And then new consumer surplus is 1/2 times 150 because it shifted over, times 1 because that's the distance between these. And that would give you 75. So the initial consumer surplus was 100, and then the new was 75. So you can see that it decreases on the graph.